This is Carlton.
Russia's new president promises aggressive leadership. Surprising evidence for the second Bloody Sunday inquiry. Controversial new scheme to save car buyers thousands. And Hollywood embraces British talents at the Oscars.
From ITN, the ITV Nightly News with Dermot Murnaghan.
Good evening. Russia's new president, Vladimir Putin, celebrated his election victory today, insisting he would maintain his tough stance in the crisis over Chechnya. The president said the military campaign in the breakaway republic would be pursued to the end. That was despite renewed calls from the West to put a stop to the war. President Putin also told his people he had no swift solutions to end poverty and corruption in Russia. Here's our Moscow correspondent, Mark Webster.
Surrounded by the Russian military this evening, Mr. Putin signalled a new era of aggressive leadership from the Kremlin. And he made it clear that despite repeated Western criticism, the war in Chechnya would be pursued to the end. Earlier, the 47-year-old political newcomer had thanked his ministers for their help in the election. He'll also have left them in no doubt. He's now the boss, and he wants a stronger and more confident Russia. So how exactly has Vladimir Putin risen to be president? His first job was as a KGB agent. He then entered politics with various posts in St. Petersburg and the Kremlin, where he came to the attention of Boris Yeltsin. In August last year, he was made Prime Minister, and on New Year's Eve, he became the acting president. And though Boris Yeltsin toasted the success of his protégé, the new Kremlin leadership will want to make a clean break with the past and its history of corruption and cronyism. Instead, Mr. Putin's shown a greater openness towards the West. In his meeting 2 weeks ago with Britain's Tony Blair, he was keen to enlist Western economic help to rebuild the wasted Russian economy. And in one of his first phone calls after being made president, they were on first-name terms.
Tony, я очень благодарен вам за этот звонок.
Tony, he said casually, thanks for the call. Nonetheless, as the lights burned late in the Kremlin tonight, the new president will follow Russia's interests in areas like Chechnya, whatever the outside world thinks. Mr. Putin has made it clear that he wants to combat organised crime and fight corruption, which is rife in Russian society. However, in order to do that, he said he will strengthen institutions like the police and the army, which many believe will lead to a centralisation of power in the Kremlin and make him more and more of an autocrat. Mark Webster, ITN, Moscow.
The biggest inquiry in British legal history began today to find out what happened in the events surrounding Bloody Sunday. 14 people died when British paratroops opened fire at a civil rights march in Derry in 1972. The evidence will include a tape recording, allegedly of an army officer ordering a soldier to shoot dead someone 2 days before Bloody Sunday. John Irvine reports.
If the history of Bloody Sunday is to be rewritten, it will be done by the 3 tribunal judges, and they have a huge amount of evidence to consider. Among the materials submitted to the inquiry are audio tapes recorded by a radio ham during the troubled run-up to Bloody Sunday. One recording is believed to be of an army officer talking to a subordinate on the ground during an alleged attack by nail bombers. After reporting that a device has been thrown, the soldier, call sign 61, is asked by the officer, call sign 19, if he can still see the youth responsible.
Are you absolutely certain the person you can see is the nail bomber? Over. 6-1 positive, over. 19, shoot him dead, over.
The soldier fired but missed. 2 days later, on Bloody Sunday, paratroopers shot dead unarmed civilians in the Bogside. The then Lord Chief Justice incensed nationalists by officially clearing the soldiers of any wrongdoing. Lord Widgery took less than 3 months to complete his inquiry. The new investigation, which began this morning, is expected to last up to 2 years. In his opening statement, the barrister for the inquiry said everybody would find some of the evidence painful and unpalatable. But what they were seeking was the truth, pure and simple, and it seems no effort will be spared in that pursuit. John Irvine, ITN, Derry.
The former Defence Minister, Peter Kilfoyle, launched a scathing attack on the government today. In the Commons, he accused it of being stridently moralising towards people in Britain. He was speaking from the backbenches after his sudden resignation in January. Mr Kilfoyle said many of his constituents in Liverpool felt chastised for being unemployed. Car buyers will tomorrow be handed another weapon in the battle for cheaper vehicles. The Consumers Association is launching an import scheme over the internet, which it's claimed will save people thousands of pounds. Chris Choi reports.
Starting tomorrow, there'll be a controversial new force in the UK car trade. The Consumers Association intends to use action, not just words, in its campaign to bring cheaper prices to Britain. The charity launches its own internet-based import scheme.
Manufacturers seem to be making no attempt to address the car pricing issue. If manufacturers decided to do something about that, brought car prices down to equivalent European levels, then maybe these types of .com companies would struggle to survive.
The Carbuster scheme promises an average saving of £4,000. Vehicles will be brought in from continental dealers. Gathering for tomorrow's commercial vehicle show in Birmingham, leaders of the UK trade were surprised but unruffled by the development.
There are many consumers who wish, of course, still to deal with a company that they know. They want to deal with their local dealer. I think that will always be the case.
Tonight, Britain's traditional motor trade is facing a fresh onslaught. Tomorrow's scheme joins others already using the internet to forge a powerful new sales link to continental car prices. But this is different, as Britain's biggest consumer group puts its name and possibly its impartiality on the line. Chris Choi, ITN, Central London.
Banks, which belong to the Link Cashpoint network, look set to put a stop to double charging at Cashpoint machines. At a meeting tomorrow, they're likely to agree a ban on disloyalty fees, the charge made by some banks when customers use other companies' cash points. At the moment, the combined fee for taking out cash can be as much as £2.50. A police report out tomorrow is expected to call for a softer line to be taken on some drugs. The Police Foundation is thought to want ecstasy to be downgraded from a Class A drug. It also wants possession of small amounts of cannabis to become a civil rather than a criminal offence. The world of music tonight paid tribute to Ian Dury, who died of cancer today. He was 57. He was best known for a string of hits in the late 70s. But as Ben McCarthy reports, he had a wide and varied life.
Hit me with your rhythm stick. Hit me, hit me.
This was the hit which made Ian Dury famous, but he was also an actor and a writer.
Sex and drugs and rock and roll.
The lyrics were the key, and it's not very many songwriters can have expressions move into the language and you've forgotten where they came from. Certainly sex and drugs and rock and roll is part of the thing now.
But in the final months of his life, he became known for charity work and his own high-profile battle against cancer. He was always a campaigner for disabled people, having suffered from polio as a child, which caused him irreparable damage. But when it became apparent that his liver cancer was inoperable, he also tried to help other sufferers come to terms with the disease.
I feel a kind of duty bound in a way to spread the word about it a little bit, because it ain't all gloom.
Immerse yourself. Drink it all in.
Recently he starred in a TV commercial which reflected his fighting spirit. This was his last video recorded with the band Madness. Ian Dury always had a huge appetite for life, once saying, "I'm not here to be remembered, I'm here to be alive." But now many will remember him, not just as a performer, but as an inspiration. Ben McCarthy, ITN.
Ian Dury, who died today. Britain came under international pressure today to close the Sellafield nuclear reprocessing plant in Cumbria. The crisis has been caused by recent safety scares and made worse by the sabotage of machinery at Sellafield over the weekend. Here's Caroline Kerr.
This evening, the future of Sellafield as a reprocessing plant is in serious doubt. Ireland and Denmark have been worried for many years about the pumping of nuclear waste from the plant into the sea. Today at a meeting in Dublin, they called for Sellafield to close.
After we know how vulnerable the Irish Sea, the North Atlantic and the Arctic is, the time has come to suspend operations there.
Sellafield has come under mounting pressure after a number of recent safety failures. This weekend, automated machinery was sabotaged, and earlier in the year it emerged that safety test results had been falsified. Now bosses at the plant are clearly worried about its future.
There are 10,000 people employed on this site. There are many tens of thousands additionally who receive work through the site's activities. The economic impact on this area of any major closure of any part of this site or the site itself would result in economic devastation in this area.
The unions want the government to appoint a safety czar to restore confidence. But the government indicated today that Sellafield needed to raise its own game to meet health and safety concerns. Caroline Kerr, ITN.
Motor racing now, and David Coulthard flew back to Britain today, pledging to deny Jenson Button his first Grand Prix point and a place in the record books. Coulthard's disqualification in Brazil meant 20-year-old Button moved up a place, but all that could change after an appeal. Peter Staunton reports.
Formula One back in the appeal court in Paris next week. McLaren will blame Brazil's newly resurfaced but very bumpy track for dislodging the front wing of David Coulthard's car. The driver, 29 today, landed back in England disappointed at losing his first points of the season, but hopeful the decision to disqualify his car could yet be overturned. He'd survived a difficult race. He'd been slowed down by a faulty gearbox, but when the McLaren was examined later, his real problems began. One small section of the front wing, which should have been 50 millimetres above the ground, was illegal. It's allowed to slip to 45, but the part was, they claimed, only 43 millimetres above the ground.
Quite clearly, there's no way we started that race with any intention of having something that wasn't within the regulations, and I need to leave that in the hands of the team.
But if the appeal fails, another record falls to Jenson Button. He becomes the youngest driver ever to get in the points. A well-deserved reward, if only for pulling off the most audacious overtaking manoeuvre of the season. And if Button does get the point...
If the results stand, then I think as a fellow Brit, he should give me 10% of whatever prize money he gets for his first point.
Peter Staunton, ITN Sport.
The British director Sam Mendes said today he wouldn't even try to top his Oscar-winning success. His film American Beauty won 5 awards last night. There was also success for Michael Caine, who won Best Supporting Actor in The Cider House Rules. James Mates reports.
There were high expectations for the British in Hollywood this year, with nominations in most of the major categories, and they weren't to be disappointed. 5 Oscars altogether, including 2 of the big ones. But the big story this year was the success of one movie, American Beauty.
The Oscar goes to American Beauty.
Unquestionably the film of the year, it walked off with 5 awards, including Best Picture.
Honey, don't be weird.
All right, honey, I won't be weird.
Okay.
I'll be whatever you want me to be.
Oscars too for its star, Kevin Spacey, and its British director.
Sam Mendes for American Beauty.
He's known for his work in the West End. Amazingly, this was his first film.
You, to the Academy, thank you so, so much.
In contrast, Michael Caine was last night clutching the second Oscar of an extraordinary career, Best Supporting Actor for his role in The Cider House Rules. Phil Collins, another veteran who'd been nominated before, celebrated his first Oscar for the theme song to the movie Tarzan. But as the stars moved on to parties across Hollywood, the name on everyone's lips was Sam Mendes. That was one movie, one Oscar. That's a pretty good record.
Yeah, I'm going to quit. If I quit now, I become a legend.
How do you follow that?
I don't really. I don't try. And I'm never going to top it. It's my first movie. It's done fantastically well. I'm incredibly proud of it.
Other Britons here were determined that Hollywood can't have all of him. Do you think the West End's lost him to Hollywood now?
Certainly not. I've given him a good talking to. Certainly not. He's got to go back to the Donmar and do a play straight away. And he's going to, I think.
And the morning after, as they nurse their hangovers, all the British winners here will know just how much winning here has done for their future prospects. As so often the day after the Oscars, Hollywood is acclaiming the arrival of a big new star. What's unusual this time is that it's not an actor, but a director, Sam Mendes, and a British one at that. James Mates, ITN, Hollywood.
The headlines again. Russia's new president, Vladimir Putin, says he'll maintain his tough stance over the war in Chechnya. The new inquiry into Bloody Sunday began today in Northern Ireland, and a controversial scheme starts tomorrow to try to lower the price of cars. Tonight's financial figures: the FTSE 100 share index was down more than 50 points. On the American markets, the Dow Jones was also down. It closed 86 points lower, and the pound fell 0.5 cent against the dollar. Now for a look at tomorrow's papers. The Telegraph leads on the news that the government is to force car dealers to cut prices by up to a third. It features the singer Ian Dury, who died today, pictured with his 2 young children. The Guardian goes back to Mozambique a month after the floods first hit the headlines and says now is the moment for foreign governments to decide how far their commitment to the country goes. The Mail's top story is ex-Minister Peter Kilfoyle's criticism of the government over the budget. It sees his outburst as a sign of old Labour roaring back into life. It shows Michael Caine and Kevin Spacey celebrating their Oscar wins. The Times says there are plans to strip the post office of its monopoly on delivering letters costing under £1. It pictures Mick Jagger, who's been talking about his rebellious school days. And The Sun claims that a second spy has lost his laptop computer. It follows on from last week's story that an MI5 agent had his laptop snatched from an underground station. And that's it for tonight. The ITV Evening News is at 6:30 tomorrow. We're back at 11. Until then, good night.